Hello, friends. This is Carol Baldwin from Write to Ignite. Today I'm speaking to you about the difference between writing a middle grade novel and writing a young adult novel. In September, we are going to be hosting Tessa Hall, who will be speaking to us about writing young adult. So this is to help you get ready for that masterclass. So one of the biggest differences between middle grade and young adult are the ages of the characters, as which will determine the ages of your readers. In middle grade, the characters can be anywhere from 8 years old up to 14, which is a pretty big span. So in the 8 to 12-year-old range, you have a younger middle grade, or maybe 8 to 11, and then 12 to 14, you have upper middle grade. Although agents do not recommend that you categorize that when you send out a manuscript, but that is more for you to keep in mind who your character is and who your potential audience is. Young adult protagonists are usually between 13 and 18, and that's who your readers are. I wanted to show you this book. So in case you want to read more about it, Writing Irresistible Kidlit by Mary Cole gives you a discussion about that. And there's also a lot of articles on the internet. I found this one, Writer's Digest, the key differences between middle grade versus young adult, that basically has exactly that, the key differences. So we talked about the character and the reader's age, and there's differences. I mean, kids that are 9 years old are a lot different than kids who are 15 years old. Their thoughts, their emotions, their concerns, their attitudes, their opinions about their world, how they see the world are very different. And so that will be reflected in the book that you write. I am in the middle of writing a book, Half Truths, and one of the things that has been difficult for me is to decide, is this a middle grade book or is this a young adult book? And I have gone back and forth a lot. But one of the things that my readers have noticed consistently is that it sounds middle grade. So my main character's voice, it sounds less sophisticated, it sounds younger than a teenager's voice. And her concerns and the way that she internalizes and what she's worried about and her friendships all sound more middle grade than a teenager's concerns. And so I have finally decided this is a middle grade book after many years of going back and forth. A character in a middle grade, their world is smaller than typically the characters in a young adult book. So for instance, in Lisa Fowler's book, Snakes and Stones, it's the main character, Chestnut Hill, is 12 years old, and her world is her father's wagon. He is a traveling salesman in the early part of the 20th century, and he is going from village to village and town to town selling medical remedies that are hoaxes. So that is what her world is about. Her world is about that wagon, and her concern is finding truth out about her mother and reclaiming her mother. Another example of a middle grade book is Joyce Hofstadter's book Equal. This is her newest book and latest book in the Baker's Mountain series. And in that, Jackie's world is in Hickory, North Carolina, small town, Baker's Mountain area, very small area. Although the story is impacted by the larger world events of the civil rights movement, his concerns really focus on his family and his friendships right in the immediate vicinity of that town. And that's interesting too. I just thought of that. For Lisa Fowler's book, Chestnut Hill's concerns also revolve right around her family. So it's a smaller world. Young adult, you have a bigger world. So here's an example of a young adult book, Ships, Secrets, and Survivors by Sarah Rodecker and Helena George. And in that, the world is the ocean. You have pirate hunters who are out on the ocean looking for a murderer. And so there's there's larger, bigger action and larger stakes, if you will, in this young adult book. That you have older characters who are able to navigate the ocean and who are able to run a ship. Another example of a young adult book is The Button Girl. So in this one, the girl is 16, and her world is much larger than the middle grade books. Her world revolves around her this fantasy world. Overlords have um, have stolen people from the villages to be their slaves, and her quest is to really it ends up uncovering some of the rules and some of the history, and she ends up questioning a lot about that bigger world and that whole bigger world system. So those are some of the differences. You also have a difference in word length. Middle grade tends to be a lot shorter. You have 30,000 to 50,000 words in middle grade, although fantasy can be a little bit longer. Young adult, you have about 50,000 to 75,000 words, which is, and it can, fantasy can be a little bit longer. The content is different. You don't, in middle grade, there is not profanity, graphic violence, or sexuality. If there is romance, it is limited to maybe a crush or a first kiss. And in YA, it can be a lot edgier, although hopefully for a Christian audience, you're writing clean YA. But typically, in the way it is written now, is that YA can include sexuality, violence, and also drug and alcohol abuse. So those are some of the ways in which YA and middle grade differ. Hope that you'll come to our class on writing for young adults and you'll learn a lot more. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.